When I was 7 years old, the highlight of my week was when I got to go to the Dog and Suds drive-in for dinner. On Friday nights, after my father had come home from work, my family would pile into the Rambler station wagon and make way to the restaurant known for its Coney Island hot dogs and the world's creamiest root beer. While we eagerly dug into our meals, the unmistakable, mentholated baritone of Lou Rawls drifted from the 8-track. My dad usually sang along. He wasn't any good. And we'd laugh, which provoked him to sing louder and more off-key. Dinner at Dog and Suds was one of the few activities Mom and Dad were able to afford during our time in Colorado Springs. My father, Sergeant Charles Clements, donated his services to the U.S. Army for a year, the result of his being overpaid during his 12-month deployment to Vietnam in 1968. It wasn't Dad's fault. The government made the mistake. But when he was assigned to his next post at Fort Carson, Colorado, the Army wanted its money back. So his wages were garnished. To earn money, Dad took a job with a cleaning service, cleaning offices and hotels at night while he worked for the Army during the day. He worked 2 full-time jobs until he paid off his debt. My father was a good man. He loved his family and served his country for 21 years. But when I was growing up, Dad and I weren't close. See, the problem stemmed from his taciturn nature. He didn't know how to talk with his children. The other reason is Dad would whip his kids as a means of discipline, whatever the infraction. I mean, there were no timeouts or being grounded for doing something wrong. None of the whippings, they elicited the effect my father wanted. Children who submitted to his rules and stayed out of trouble. It also produced the result that I was terrified of my father and hated his existence. Some of you may be thinking, shoot, I got whippings when I was growing up, but I probably deserved it, and I turned out fine. I never thought that. Even as a child, I knew my dad wouldn't want anyone beating his adult ass for something wrong he did. The beatings, they remained a constant threat until I was 15 years old, when, for the first time in my life, I stood up to my father. I don't remember or recall what I had done to set him off repeatedly punching me in the chest with his fist and taunting me with, "Oh, you think you a man now?" I stood still and glared at him, fighting to keep my tears at bay. It was the last time Dad hit me. The chasm between us became permanent. Our limited conversations were now reduced to Dad passing orders. Make sure you do your chores. What do you do when the father who raised you is so different from the man that others remember? I mean, I remember talking with kids I grew up with and friends of my father, and the person that emerged from these conversations was as different as night and day. The person known as ShadeTree. See, ShadeTree was funny, gregarious, and generous, easy as a cool breeze in summertime. ShadeTree, with a Pall Mall cigarette dangling from his lips, repaired cars for his friends, no charge. ShadeTree would hold court at his favorite bar, the Pickle Factory, cracking up patrons with jokes and tall tales. ShadeTree befriended classmates I grew up with, giving advice as a trusted elder. I mean, these stories surprised and disappointed me. I mean, I wanted to know, where was ShadeTree in my life? But then there were 2 moments. When I was about to graduate from high school, I learned that Dad's parents had horribly abused him as a child. Previously, I had only had wonderful memories of my grandparents, particularly my grandfather. I was shocked and angry. And now my grandparents were coming in from out of town to see their eldest grandchild graduate. I told Dad I didn't want them to attend. My father, he was quiet for a moment. And then he explained, "Your grandparents love you and want to see you graduate. Please don't hold their past actions against them now." I acquiesced, not fully understanding his generosity. The second moment came years later. I was miserable in college and wanted to leave and become an actor. I mean, there was no way Dad could possibly understand what I was going through. When I told him I was struggling and wouldn't earn a diploma, he said, "If being an actor will make you happy, do what makes you happy." See, these were the two sides of my father I had struggled for years to reconcile. I didn't take that first step because I believed it was Dad's responsibility. And I thought I would have time to make things right. The last time I saw Dad alive was May 1992 in a military hospital at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was in Indiana performing Shakespeare when I received the call from my mother. "Your daddy's been diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. If you want to see him, come home now." I took a Greyhound from Indianapolis to Clarksville, Tennessee. My brother and grandmother, Dad's mother, picked me up at the bus station. We drove directly to the hospital. When I saw Dad, he was painfully thin and curled in a fetal position. I asked how he was doing. I couldn't think of what else to say. With a raspy voice, he croaked, "This cancer is kicking my ass." He had a perfectly cut afro of beautiful silver gray hair and a matching goatee that Mom trimmed regularly. My family and I sat together with him for several hours. Dad died a month later. He was 53. I mourn that we didn't have more time. Time to sit at a bar together drinking beers. Time to listen to music at a jazz club. Time for fishing at a lake on a cool summer evening. A father and son as friends, sitting under a shade tree.